The red sun rises on a new day in the Dragon Isles, and Malus Darkblade is a freak. His story arc is a long, painful road, one in which he is consistently pushed to the brink of death in hopeless situations. But in Immortal Empires, he's been turned into a world beater and is arguably the strongest Dark Elf Lord in battle now. He's leading an elite expedition deep into the heart of the jungle, when suddenly, love blooms on the battlefield. Vlad and Isabella von Carstein, with a host of undead knights, have come to spoil the fun. And all the while, a black dragon soars on the thermals above, looking for an early morning breakfast. Call me Sam Mendes, because those shots were gorgeous. Dark Elves and Vampire counts today. And Vlad the Dad is out and about, leading a newly invigorated undead army. Vamp Anthem, playing loud and proud, because the Vampire counts are looking like they might be very strong when the combined campaign launches, at least in battle. Amazing access to healing, large stat buffs for the Vampire counts units across the board, magic attacks for Graveguard and Black Knights, hunger for Blood Knights, and dripped out with all kinds of new color schemes, like Helmengor's Caravan of the Blue Roses. This is an army of Graveguard, Knights, and lots of fodder, with Vlad and Isabella binding it all together, which is scary from a dual perspective, because you can pretty much keep a lord or monster permanently debuffed with Master of Beguilement. It's a 44-second debuff that lowers melee attack by 40, and then you plop one on it, wait for it to come off cooldown, and plop the other one down. It's pretty nasty to deal with. Plus, you're getting the casting and combat prowess of two legendary lords in one single build. Blood Chalice of Bathory, Invocation of Nehek, and Raised Dead, flying on a Hellsteed. Isabella might just put in some work this game. Across the way, the Dark Elves have exquisite plans for all this flesh, and elite Blood Knights, of course. There's two Scourge Runners in the Vanguard, and a Black Dragon overhead. Now, the safest way to play this matchup as the Druki, I think, is probably full kite, but they've gone for something a bit spicier here, and that is a very small and very elite core. Scourge Runners can obviously rack up great value against flyers, against enemy elite cavalry, with their armor-piercing bonus versus large boats. Bolts? Same thing. The Black Dragon has Luke's Return of the Jedi Kyber crystals in his eyeballs, and a noxious breath attack perfect for exploding hordes of chaff or elite cavalry. On the ground below are two Sisters of Slaughter and two Blackguard of Nagorond, which get pretty insane buffs from Trial of Blades, and of course Murderous Mastery when the army-wide global procs. They'll pretty much fight to the end against the undead, and that will be needed because they are severely outnumbered. Sisters of Slaughter really are just a fantastic infantry unit, deceptively tanky, fast, and killy to boot. They're lean, mean, freaky machines of death and destruction, and I must say, this Sildra Tor color scheme fits the Dark Elves quite well. That red and gold is looking scrumptious. There's a Shadow Mage in the caster slot, Melkos Mystifying Miasma, Enfeebling Foe, and Pit of Shades, which is pretty ridiculously good right now. We'll basically one-shot a lot of elite units in a single overcast, which, never been the biggest fan of unreliable vortexes that don't move, but we'll see. No question, it's an incredible spell in its current form, and Malus Darkblade himself, the Elf of the Hour, whose new healing values on Warp Sword of Cain allow him to out-regen his HP loss when turning into Tz'arkan. So you essentially have two full lives and a get-out-of-jail-free card on a powerful duelist with wave clear spells and AoE debuffs. And even if you blunder him, he just shifts into Tz'arkan and starts to slaughter anew. Look for him to pay the blood price here and put on quite a few dominant performances in the run-up to Immortal Empires. But of course, it's far from unkillable, and if you just ignore him and kill his army, he's unlikely to carry the battle entirely by himself. It's a beautiful morn for killing. Scourge Runners will spill first blood, while Vlad and the undead horde commence their leisurely stroll up the beach. 3 Blood Knights dead in that opening volley. Scourge Runners confirmed OP. Fellbats coming in from the flanks, and they will be used to try and zone out these skirmishing chariots, which would love to plunk into those Blood Knights or Black Knights for the remainder of this battle. With that large bonus versus large, they can put themselves in charge, make our nether regions enlarge, discharge their weapons, and call your mama Marge. Alright, we got Fellbats moving up, and it's actually interesting here. So, Fellbats are a super weird unit for dragons to fight. Their numbers and melee defense are actually high enough they can tie up, harry, and harass a dragon for a really long time, and basically delay or sometimes outright prevent breath attacks from coming in. And considering dragons are basically flying breath attacks, that's a problem if you're the Dark Elves, which means Fellbats need to die before that dragon can feel comfortable lining any up. It would not shock me if 2 Fellbat units could solo a Black Dragon in the air, so not the worst thing. for the Scourge Runners to try to focus them early and crumble them out. They're moving into melee at the moment. They also have that bonus versus infantry. Remember, they double in CQB as well. Got a decent charge bonus and decent bonus versus infantry, so clearing out some of the zombie fodder, not a terrible idea, but really they want to focus down those Black Knights and Blood Knights in the rear. There's no Mortis Engine, there's no Unholy Lodestone Corpse for them to fire, which means the vampire counts will not have that stacking healing that may ultimately be that element that makes them so strong in game modes like Domination. But make no mistake, that stacking healing will also work wonders in land battle too. So we'll see if that ends up being a part of their meta going forward. My inclination is yes, it's going to end up being a core part of their faction in both land battle and domination. See if Murderous Prowess pops this game too. I think there have been a few replays where that hasn't been working properly in terms of army abilities. Again, it's an early battle build, not surprised that there are some things that aren't working. As long as they're fixed before IE, that'd be great. No idea if they will be though, we can only hope. And I think in most of the Dark Elf battles I've seen, it has proc. There have just been a couple where it hasn't, and that's been true for some of the demon army abilities too. So, Scourge Runners up the center, Malus Darkblade and Spite chomping at the bit for some food to eat. Not sure the rotten undead flesh of a zombie horde will be the best snack for the raptor, but here we go. We got the Demon's Curse and the Blood Price activated in and amongst the zombie and skeleton horde. What I've been seeing from Malus a lot is that people will just basically proc his abilities constantly, right? Because you know you've got a second life no matter what. You might as well just turn his combat prowess up to 11 every single chance you get. And in a game like this one, he's not going to be able to get on anything high value for a while here. Vlad will be in and amongst a horde. Isabella will be up in the skies. The Black Knights and the Blood Knights will bide their time. So you might as well try to get through those skeleton warriors as quickly as possible. Pop all your stuff. And then, hey, if Vlad comes after you, you can run away using your max. Black Dragon might have just tried to line up some kind of breath attack from the side. But the Fellbats are diving into the rear, and there's a Pit of Shades winding up. Got Blackguard of Nagaron engaging zombies and skellies out on the left flank. And I'll be very curious how the elite of Nagaron managed to hold their own against this many undead. Graveguard, zombies, skeletons, and of course, the hammer and anvils of the Black Knights and Blood Knights moving around the flank. There is the Pit of Shades, and we are about to see an entire unit of Graveguard evaporate. They were waiting on the wings, they didn't want to commit yet and blob up, presumably to avoid a scenario like this one where wave clear spells demolish multiple stacked up units. But they're going to pay the ultimate price here for their patience. Overcast will, as we said at the beginning, essentially one-shot the entire unit. Now, it is a little bit dodgeable, at least to the point where it won't kill off your entire formation, but as I've argued before, spells that have that kind of reliable damage potential should maybe have a slightly longer wind-up time, so there's at least some counterplay there. Still though, it's the kind of spell that should heavily discourage Deathball play from healing-focused factions and will force races like the Undead to spread the field a bit more, which can be a good thing, and it's hardly a disaster, but obviously hurts to have your Skelly Bros sucked into the void without being able to do much about it. Blood Knights and Black Knights are moving around the flank, ready to tie down the Scourge Runner chariots alongside the Fell Bats. Looks like one unit of those is about to crumble out, and here comes the heavy cavalry attack. Now, multiple avenues for them. They could just zone out these Scourge Runners entirely, or they could start going for those hammer and anvil plays, but that would expose themselves and their horses' butts to bolts in the rear, and that can hurt a lot against 40 bonus first large. The Black Dragon is about to be very annoyed as an Overcast Invocation of Nahak hits the Vampire Count's right flank. That Black Dragon is essentially going to have to run for the next several minutes, at least until the Dark Elves figure out a way to clear the skies and allow that dragon to take off. Now, the Cav could chase after. Murderous Mastery actually procced. Okay, that's good. That's a good thing. I wasn't sure it was going to proc this game. It did go off. I'm glad to see it. Malus continues his rampage with the Demon's Curse and Blood Price, just beating up on skellies and zombies because he can't really get on Vlad or Isabella, but he might need to retreat and deal with this Hellsteed because now his mage is under fire and Isabella will take her to Pound Town in a straight 1v1. And there's no backline protector here really for the Dark Elves that can protect that mage like a Cold One cavalry unit. Nice Pit of Shades on Graveguard and Skelly Boys. Not sure if that one was Overcast or not. Dragon is still running from the Fell Bats. Simply does not want to turn around and fight them because it will just take forever and he might not be able to kill them anyway. He literally might still lose that fight. The mage for the Dark Elves in the color scheme of Sildra Tor getting absolutely pooped on by Isabella von Carstein, but Malus Darkblade is there to protect her as best he can and forces the Hellsteed off. Now he's going in for a duel against Vlad, and that should be a very interesting one. Blood Knights have retreated back to their own back lines. The Dread Spears have routed off in the center, but already up to 135 kills. Blackguard and Sisters of Slaughter doing a great job of just cutting through the numberless shambling hordes, and some fantastic point-blank Scourge Runner shots as they kite the Black Knights in the background, and they're actually going to be able to close into melee and finish off these whites for good. They don't have incredible sustain in melee combat, at least when they don't have support from Invocation of Nahek, and Scourge Runners will continue firing once they're in melee. Now, Malus is in a bit of a predicament here. He's got Vlad and Isabella beating on his booty, and his melee attack is consistently being reduced by 40. The Master of Beguilement stacking is a huge problem for him as the Black Dragon lets it rip with a noxious breath. Tired of being chased, tired of being harried, finally was able to take off again, and he makes it count, which, combined with the returning Scourge Runners, showed to clear the skies and allow the creature to do what it was meant to do from the start. Great fell bat play from the Vampire Counts, though, not letting up, continuing to harass that dragon, and essentially making it useless for the first 5 or so minutes of this battle. But now it's free, and the Blackguards are retreating to perhaps attempt and reinforce the Tyrant of Hag Grafe. Looks like Vlad and Isabella have disengaged, and the Bellbats crumbling out. We shall not see their like again. Blackguard trying to catch the Black Knights out. Scourge Runners were actually thinking about tying them down in melee, but Black Knights saw it coming and will retreat. Blackguard will continue the zombie and skeleton slaughter, and Scourge Runners, maybe getting some cycle charges in, could cause crumbling a little bit earlier. So far, not really a Death Star from the Dark Elves. They actually spread the field quite a bit, but the elite infantry for the Druchii has held out quite admirably, and that combined along with the Pit of Shades from that caster who has returned with only a sliver of HP, well, it's pretty much kept the Vampire Counts back on their heels and struggling to find an answer for all these elite infantry. The Sisters of Slaughter have just butchered their way through numberless hordes. Blackguard have done the exact same thing. They are starting to show the effects. I mean, their HP pools are not looking super healthy, but still tying up 2 or 3 units and setting up for another gorgeous Noxious Breath. Blood Knights seem to maybe have disengaged before the effects completely destroyed them, but still, pretty painful one. Lost a lot of Black Knights there, lost a few Blood Knights and some infantry too, and the Sisters of Slaughter still holding the line on slivers of health. But Vlad continuing his rampage, and he's a great counter for the Sisters of Slaughter. Certainly has enough killing power to get through them relatively quickly, provided he has some infantry support. Malus doing the exact same thing, just trying to cut through all the chaff, which has been a problem for both sides. How do you deal with all the infantry? They just have different ways of going about it. Malus is up to 1500 HP, continuing using that Demon's Curse to lower the leadership of the skeletons and zombies in an AoE, although at this point, he would probably be better served disengaging and trying to come after Vlad or cash out Isabella if she decides to land, and that will be a very curious play on the Vampire Count side. What do you do with Isabella here? She's been useful. She's gotten some great Invocation of the Hex off, and she's gotten some great dueling in on Malus too, though his Warp Sword of Cain has mostly avoided the effects by regenning himself back to full. You can tell the cavalry has been very reticent on the undead side to engage because, 1, you expose yourself to sulfuric breath attacks. 2, you expose yourself to Pit of Shades if you charge in and tarry there too long. So the Blood Knights and the Black Knights just got another Overcast Invocation Heck sent their way. This is definitely the way you want to use Vlad. Get him in and amongst some elite infantry. You obviously can't catch Malus, you can't catch Scourge Runners, you can't catch the Dragon, so you might as well have him beating up on elite infantry and generating value that way. And then in the late game, you can force those duels with Isabella and the Master of Beguilement stacking. But the Knights just don't want to commit, and that's the biggest problem the Undead have right now, as these Blackguard have finished off all the Undead on this side of the battlefield. Is that the only way for the Vampire Counts to win this game is, of course, if the Black Knights or the Blood Knights start killing off the Blackguard and Sisters of Slaughter, while the Vampire Counts still have some kind of anvil. But if they go in too early or at the wrong time, then Pit of Shades or Breath Attack is going to punish them heavily. And here comes the Black Dragon, finally down into melee combat. Blood Knights decided they had to go in, but now they're forced into a horrible situation because they've been pulled back into melee and Pit of Shades right on top of them will utterly delete them from the universe. And we will see no more of those Elite Knights of Blood Keep. God damn, that is a nasty spell right now, and that's a huge loss for the vampire counts. Isabella might have the combat ability to take on a black dragon, though, using Master of Beguilement and, hey, zombie summons if they're on the ground. I think the black dragon realizes he's not going to land any attacks while Master of Beguilement is procced and active, so he'll take flight once more, but he can't outrun a Hellsteed that moves at 105 speed. I think the black dragon moves at 90 or 95, so he will be forced into a duel with no access to healing whatsoever. And that's an important point, because guess what? Isabella, when she drops low, Blood Chalice and Bathory, one of the best single target heals in the entirety of Immortal Empires. So even if she did somehow get super low, which is unlikely against the Black Dragon, it's debuffed by minus 40 melee attack, well, you're just going to be right back in the fight once that Blood Chalice kicks in. Now, Malus just turned into Tz'arkan. Reaper of Souls activated. Bloodstorm activated. He made sure he used all of his abilities as Malus and then turned into Tz'arkan, and his demonic form is just straight up pooping on Vlad. Now, to be fair, the Von Carstein Lord has fallen, but he was surrounded by Blackguard of Nagorond and Sisters of Slaughter, with Malus Darkblade also beating on his face. That was not ever going to be a fun fight for him. Bad scenario for the Lord of Castle Drakenhof. But Vlad's gone, and without him, Isabella must land. She actually destroyed the Black Dragon in a straight-up fight, which is very impressive. She's done a great job this game. Probably the MVP for the vampire counts, and will potentially chase it to the edge of the map. But you know what? There are more fun things to do. Like, hey, let's get a duel going. Malus Darkblade, who's apparently Caterin based on his portrait above, will fight the wife of the now deceased vampire count Lord. Tz'arkan will spew his demonic energies forth, and Isabella has approximately 0% chance of getting Malus past half HP. It's just not a fair fight at all. He's got way better stats, less utility, of course, but a lot more damage in this kind of scenario, and that is going to be Crumble City. Sildrator takes the battlefield. So, very interesting game. Of course, honestly, I think that was a pretty good Vampire Counts build. It isn't making use of the stacking healing buffs that we've seen are going to be so impactful in Immortal Empires, and you will probably see some corpse cards mixed in if you're bringing that much infantry. But Malus himself, 4,000 damage value. He's an absolute freak right now, dude. 2,100 basically off the back of 2 Pit of Shades and a few Melkoth's Mystifying Miasmas. Every time she was chased off, she would return to the fold. She was beaten, battered, bloody, but not broken. And when she came back, she made that magic count every single time. Just a perpetual thorn in the side of the undead. Black Dragon got some decent breath attacks in, was useful, but certainly not an MVP, and obviously crazy kill counts on the Blackguard, Sisters of Slaughter, and even the Dread Spears. Dread Spears with 400 kills. Never seen the like. Scourge Hunters were also pretty useful. Now, Isabella, definitely MVP, almost 3,000 value on her. She almost single-handedly dealt with a Black Dragon, and the Fellbat play was awesome. Unfortunately, the Knights had a really difficult time committing to any fight and just staying in there, at least for the 10 seconds while the charge bonus is active. Some hammer and anvils into the back of the Blackguard or Sisters of Slaughter would have been very useful. Problem was, Scourge Runners owned them out for a while, and then the threat of the Pit of Shades and the breath attacks made it so difficult to commit. So, I don't know. Like, it feels like Pit of Shades does make it really scary for Blood Knights to ever go into melee anywhere. Because even if you see it coming, Blood Knights can dodge it better than most Vampire Counts infantry for sure. But if you miss micro for a split second or don't see that effect go down, you're losing 1,700 gold pretty much right off the bat, and even Invocation of the Heck might have a difficult time bringing them back from the brink. So, interesting game. Malus is a beast. Pit of Shades is beastly. Hope you guys enjoyed.